fighting, arguments, disagreements with your wife, all common things to have, all common things to run into. But what's harder is to have those fights, arguments, and disagreements and build relationship instead of destroy relationship. And this is all about how you view it when you're in the middle of that. Very, very easy to get into a fight, argument, disagreement with your wife, and you come at it hostile, anger, defensive, find ways to get after it. Now, obviously, this podcast is very dedicated to your wife and having a relationship and building it, because to be a better father, you have to start with the priority of your wife. In order to do that, you have to be working on building relationships. Now, we're humans. She's been raised different. You've been raised different. You're going to get into disagreements, differences, arguments, fights. You're going to get after each other. You know your wife at a certain point better than any other person on the face of planet Earth, and she knows you better. At one point or another, she will be the person that you are with more than anyone else as well in the entire span of your lifetime. Whether you're only a couple years married or you're 40 plus years married, there's a point in your life where she is officially the person you've spent the most time with. Meaning you should be continually looking at improving. But when you've been with someone that long, you know how to butt heads. You know how to push buttons. You know how to hurt someone. You know how to get after them. You also know how to build someone. You also know how to help them. You also know what matters to them. And that's the difference when you're going to get into a disagreement with your fight. And the reason why I bring this up is because my wife and I got into one just the other day about the time that I spent and the commitments that I made for the day and how I was hanging out with some buddies and doing some stuff, and I took too long and communication didn't go the way that it went. And instead of getting into it where I got defensive about how I should get to go spend time and I shouldn't have to handle stuff and I shouldn't have to communicate the way that she wanted and stuff like that, we got after it and we agreed. There was a portion of this where I was late, and we dealt with that. And I was late, and that wasn't okay, and we moved on from that. And then we got into it, and she had an expectation over communication. She expected that when I called her, left her a voicemail. I called her, I didn't leave her a voicemail. I haven't done that in the 5 years we've been married. I've never left her a voicemail. And I didn't follow it up with a text. Another thing I haven't done in the 5 years that we've been together, I call her, and she calls me back. And that's always been how our communication goes. This time in particular, I called her, she didn't answer. The plans that I had made with buddies changed because the golf course was closed. So we ended up going somewhere else so that we could shoot some pool, hanging out for a little bit. Called her to let her know that. She didn't answer. I went and hung out. I was late to dinner with family because of this. And at that time, she called me super irritated. So we got to sit down and have a conversation about this. And it was a heated discussion. One of my favorite terms that somebody told me just the other day is they call it heated fellowship, because we're always building relationship with God, and that's fellowship. And so we're going through this and we're having this argument about how I'm spending my time. And we get to the point that it's okay. To make sure I understood my wife, I tell her, please let me know I'm not being an asshole. I'm not trying to be a jerk right now. I want to know that I am understanding you correctly. What I'm hearing you say is that you acknowledge that I attempted to communicate. This is the same way I've always communicated. This time in particular, it was not a good enough form of communication. We went back and forth for a little bit, having some conversation. At this point, she had come down from being super pissed off, and now she was only mildly pissed off. And so we're having this conversation, and we're able to get to the point that she agrees, yes, you attempted, it wasn't good enough this time. And I say, okay, is it fair to assume that I can work on this, but it's hard for you to get mad at me for something that you've never told me? She said, yes, that's fair. So we were able to resort through a fight that I could have easily just gotten defensive, saying, no, I get to spend time, I get to hang out with buddies, I get to do what I want, and you get to deal with it. This is what I'm choosing to do. And instead I just went, you're right, I was late. Let's talk about the fact of the communication, because that's the piece you're upset with. What went wrong? How do we fix this? And let me make sure I understand you. And when I did that, my wife was able to go, okay, cool. We know what needs to change. We know what needs to be fixed. We know what went wrong. Let's work on this together. And we both established a couple things that we're going to do to help hold each other accountable so that this doesn't happen. Because at the end of the day, anger and frustration is something that comes up in marriage, and it's typically a form of response to disappointment or letdown. It's typically, if you get mad at your spouse, it's because she let you down in some way. And if your spouse gets mad at you, it's because you let her down in some way. So a fight isn't to get mad at each other and going back and forth. A fight is to say, hey, I'm hurt. How do we deal with this so that I don't make this mistake to hurt you again? At the end of the day, I wanted to be able to just say, well, I want to hang out with my buddies when I want, and that's what I'm going to do. But my wife is the person who is the most important to me. And if that's true, I need to work on building a relationship with her and be willing to put my selfish pride aside and say, I care about her more than I care about my buddies. How do I fix this? But the piece that I needed more than anything was just better communication. So if I'm going to take the time to have better communication with my wife, I'm going to bleed that into having better communication with my kids. And if I'm going to have better communication with my kids, I'm going to grow as a husband and I'm going to grow as a father. At the end of the day, the one piece that I want to leave you guys with is this is great. Like, this is a great thing. If this helps you, I'm super encouraged that this helps you find another way when you get into an argument with your wife. The only way that this is going to make a change, though, is if you start with your communication with God. You got to start communicating with Him on a daily basis, prayer, in the Word. And if you can work on those things, you're going to watch communication change in every avenue of your life. You can work as hard as you want to change other areas, but until you have God as the firm foundation, your relationships with your wife and kids can only go so far. So focus on God today. Focus on your wife second. Go back to your kids. Build relationships every day, every minute.